Now we will move on to the first panel this morning. A group of leaders of this industry will analyze the current landscape of the table grape industry in Chile and the world. The panel will be comprised, and please come to the stage to put your microphones if you require, Mr. Enrique Turri, Mr. Christian Corssen, Mr. Mark Player, Oscar Salgado, and moderators, Carolina Cruz and Dragomir Ljubetic. While they are prepared next to the stage, I'm going to provide brief bios of each of them. Mr. Enrique, agronomist, grower and exporter with more than 30 years of experience, General Director of Convento Viejo and partner of Torre with more than 700 hectares of fruit crops. Participates actively in unions such as Gesex and Ljubetic associations. Christian Gesex, agronomist with experience in growing, exportation and commercial strategy of the industry. Mr. Gonzalo Tocornal, Executive Director, Santa Elena exporter, agronomist, grower, and focused on variety, innovation, and exportable quality. He leads a company with global market trajectory of grape table. Mr. Oscar Salgado, cocoa for the industry, international technical advisor with more than 35 years of experience in table grape, agronomist, and MBA specialist on variety development after crop and commercialization. And the moderators, Mrs. Carolina Cruz Vargas, agronomist and advisors in table grape, vice president of Juvanova, and she is agricultural manager in Westphalia Fruit, Chile. Mr. Dragomir Ljubetic, agronomist and technical advisor specialized on table grape. Also director of Juvanova with wide trajectory in agronomic management, variety assessment, and productive improvement of fruit crops. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Rafa is messing everything up. Please take your seats. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. This is beautiful, seeing the full table grape industry, the great family of table grape all together. With a huge, very great panel, table grape is going to turn almost a century, 95 years of production since the pioneers came. We are sharing the book Pioneers of Grapes by Ernesto de Lassi to make a tribute for the first people who arrived with this crop to Chile, both in the 5th region and the 4th region of the country. My dear Bravo, we have a great panel with luxury guests, all of them with lots of experience. We will try to ask lots of questions that, of course, are gathered from the questions by growers, by their concerns. I'm going to ask you to be as accurate as possible because we have lots of questions to ask, and hopefully the answers to be as accurate and sharp as possible, to take advantage and leverage all the experience. Well, 90 years that grape didn't wear glasses. We didn't either. We're going to address with you some key topics for decision making, and as an introduction, assuming that Peru will continue increasing their volumes the next season. Yesterday we were talking about that this year we could reach 90 million boxes. Just picking up what Rafael said, that we won't have strike threats in U.S. ports, that both shipments from Peru and Chile will be normal this season, but with a 10% tariff. What can we do in order to be competitive again with our exports from Chile? Based on that, the first question is, do you think the L size 18.5 to 20 millimeter is going to be the new M? Then it means, are we going to increase the category, and shouldn't we continue exporting? It means, should we only export from Chile XL or 20 millimeters and up? Should we upgrade and standardize quality standards as a country? I would like Christian Corsen's opinion. Thank you, Carola. Good morning. I'm going to be the first one in giving an answer. Very short, yes and yes. I think when I met Rafa, when there's no fruit in the market, everything is sold very well. But assuming we are going to be in a regular market where offer is higher than the demand, we have to be competitive. And today, competitive is not being competitive with our neighbors or the next door grower, but with Peru, that we know in general they produce better sizes. And I think for most varieties in sections such as cotton candy, most markets in some European countries, we need to reach with competitive sizes. To me, that's 20 millimeters and up. And if you look at what retailers are asking for in the US, every retailer is asking for fruit 20 millimeters and up. This is not an invention. This is something real demanded by retailers. Regarding the second part of the question, I think we have to encourage, also somehow, we have to be stronger, make the Uvas de Chile brand stronger. And we need to speak the same language. That means if we are talking about XL, we must agree these are 20 millimeters, not 18, 18.5 or 19.5, standardizing not only the sizes but everything related to the quality standards and having a more homogeneous and consistent product. Thank you. Gonzalo Tocornal, welcome. Could you please complement a little bit or add to this question? Well, thank you very much for your invitation. It is not easy to add. We have to concentrate in what could add value. I think a lot was already covered by Rafael. It is worth noting that in our experience that shouldn't be applied to everybody. The size issue became an entry point. Without any doubt that medium and large doesn't exist in our case. Retailers were related with everyone wants 20 and up. There's no question about it. Rather than that being a trend, it's our ambassador put pressure, which is Peru, which is advanced in the offer, and they offer sweet block and other varieties that are big sizes, and that changed the perception. There was an old belief that small varieties but with good taste, with good crunchiness, good texture could be successful, but I would say that's the past. Having perhaps a window, a scarcity moment, but we cannot keep on working for scarcity, in my opinion. And just taking advantage of the question, I don't know whether regarding a standardizing thing, I think it is good, but I don't know. The world and history has shown that the intervention of associations by the state, as it was in South Africa, that part I'm not very clear about that. Obviously, we have to withdraw from the market fruit in bad condition, and everybody, according to results, have to figure out how to take it out. Finally, to clarify that we believe that by far today, since there is more competition, there's more exposure of some varieties, there's more communications, retailers travel to the different markets, we think it is important not to be fooled by sizes, because the size is an entry point, but what adds value abroad, without question, is the varieties, not because of a fashion or because of the propaganda, as the colleague said, but the acceptation is as important as the size, as the crunchiness, the taste, freshness. These are very important issues. Then just taking into account the size, but having into account what consumers are demanding, which is more crunchiness. taste, and taste, sweet taste. We have to be careful with special flavor varieties. It's being talked a lot about them, but I think it is a flooded market with this tide of varieties with good sizes, but with suffering a lot of these problems. Next question. Most of the seasons we saw demand for white grape. We was talking about in the presentation, almost 2-to-1 ratio in favor of the white grape, and the black grapes are dropping. Do you agree with this situation? Do you think it is punctual? If so, what do you think is the reason, and what do you think is going to be the trend in the future? Let's talk about that topic, Gonzalo. What's your opinion? Yeah, can we hear it? We have to look at the history. But white grape consumption was for decades sponsored by Thompson's in the US together with black varieties, the seed varieties. These were the varieties that influenced in Europe and the United States and that were the most important. White grapes, in my opinion, demand was dropping because of problem after harvesting. Basically, white expressed defects much more. And varieties such as, I don't know what to name, but Crucivilius, Thompson, etc., have always been a problem for retailers. I remember a very big receiver that known by everyone. They always say in the speech that he evoked the 60s and the 70s, the first shipments of the Thompsons. Handpumps with the operation, it was a disaster. I don't know whether they were received by ship and then in train. The white grapes had a very big problem of waste. That at the end of the day, it was a big problem for retailers. Together with what consumers wanted was the most important. That was completely turned over 3 decades ago when Flame and then Crimson arrived. And I think because of the waste, the market changed to red grapes. And currently, with the arrival of these new varieties that could be many, I just mentioned a few ones, Globe, etc., and some others, the demand came back to what it used to be. And I think the United States and other countries prefer white grapes, and with the arrival of new grapes, white grapes with good flavor, with less post-harvesting problems, less waste, without any question will be 2-to-1 to 3-to-1 less demand for black, and there's going to be a period. We have to be careful if we end up overproducing white. What is going to happen is what happened with the Thompson, that it was the Thompson that could be stored with better skin, etc., and the market was flooded, and that's coming. We have to be careful with Subglow, the bottom crest. It's not just planting, because today these are varieties that markets are demanding, but we have to be careful if we're going to go to the low price part, because these are varieties with problems. We have to be careful. A great white grape producer, grower, Enrique, what's your opinion? First, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation and for sharing this important panel. Well, there's a little to add to what Gonzalo said. I fully agree that in general, consumers in the US and in Europe, specifically the UK, consumption has always been very high and preferably white grapes. In fact, if we look at the past, Chilean white grapes, the Thompson, but from the aggregate volume arriving in the US of Thompson, no more than 25% was good. Besides, when change started, if we think about Peru in 2012, Chile had lots of crimson because of production that was planted, because it was a very productive variety versus Thompson that it was difficult to grow. And Peru clearly started to replace the crops with white, amongst them sweet globe. And in Chile, we were a little bit late to that change. We agreed, we accessed first because of genetic programs to red varieties that were forced. Plantation were forced because red grapes are more productive. And in the US, well, if you look at the retailers have started to look at red grapes with good eyes because their waste was much less than white grapes. Waste in displays, I mean. And that for supermarkets is very important because they had Thompson. As long as the new white varieties arrived to those markets, the scenario changed. And I think today, preferably, the US is more than we think. I think it is 75% white grapes, between 20% to 20% red grapes, and black grapes that in Chile at a certain moment had more offer than the demand in the market, has been decreasing from 5%, and white, and in particular tasty ones, have replaced that niche of black because black have more condition problems they have always had. It is difficult. The color, the hail is closed, and this is something people don't like. And flavor varieties or taste varieties have replaced that. I think the ratio will be more or less the same, 7 to 75% white grapes, and the remaining between red and good flavor. I'm going to ask production if they could support me with the slide that Rafael showed, but just to complement the next question. We continue with you, Enrique. You've already answered a little bit. The question was, what should be the total volume that Chile should produce in order to maintain a balance in the offer between Chile and Peru, let's say, and the demand to achieve good prices? For that, what should the offer from Chile be like in terms of percentage of total per month you estimate would achieve a balance? And if possible, if you could complement with what kind of grape, white, black, red, or red globe? You said a little bit this, but I would like to dive deeper into that. Thank you for the question. It was easy. We love you, Enrique. Well, the numbers, if we analyze that the United States this year was 94 million boxes, if I'm not wrong, it could be 100 because of heat waves and so forth. Out of those 100 millions to the US, 75% is to their own market and 25% is exported by the US. I don't know whether they could export to Chile right now, but that's a different story. But that 75%, that is 75 million boxes, is what the US consumes from late May, June, which is their season, up to December. They try to cover as late as possible. We are talking about, 6 months at least. If we translate that to Chile, Peru, well, Peru this year were 82 million boxes, out of which 40 or 42 million, one half, went to the American market. And Peru is positioned that the north of Peru is part of Piura. Let's talk from November, December is already covered. January, they have at least 4 months. February, and Ica is reaching March. Chile's window, I think we were talking to Christian, the openness of the Chilean market, if the northern fruit, specifically the third region, that has delayed their production. I think, I don't know whether that's good or not, but they compete with very good fruit. I think the North have to make an important self-analysis about the quality of their fruit. Third region is 10 million, the fourth region is more or less 10 more millions. We've got 20 millions there. I think Chile starts in the market in February, but it is increasingly concentrated, and they only have March and April. Reaching May is very difficult. I think Chile shouldn't export more than 30 to 35 million boxes, luckily, to the United States. And the rest, the offer is more or less 10 millions a week in total Chile. One half goes to the US, the other half to the other markets. But I think it is very important to keep on exploring, coming back to retake the European market that in Chile decreased a lot this year. This year the volume in Europe increased, but we stopped being an important stakeholder from the late 90s and the early 2000s. Chile was a very relevant actor, or very relevant player in England, but what the person from Tesco is good. There are exchange rate issues, things about India that started competing with volumes in grape, but Chile has to retake to put that other half of fruit. And I think the ratio is what I said, 70 to 75% is going to be that way, and the rest remaining between taste and red. And the important thing is try to distribute this better. To our world walker, how do you see from the outside? The same question for you. What do you think should be Chile's offer in terms of percentage per month? And hopefully, what do you see from your view from abroad of the variety proportion? Well, I think we have to double click individually to companies. What market are they aiming at? What's the market they are targeting? We talked a little bit, mainly is the American market, but the world is a little bit bigger than that. In fact, I think the Grimson position red grapes even everywhere in the world. I think the distribution has to be hand by hand, strategically speaking, with the agreement they have, and it's very easy with the Monday's newspapers knowing the results from Sunday that you have with your importers, because they have to provide information of what the market wants and needs. I don't know whether we could standardize quality norms, but I think we are lacking lots of discipline in the business. I've always talked about the business as an industry. Facing that, regarding the European market, I've worked mainly. It is almost, when I talk about Europe, it's not England, very respectfully, it's almost 50-50 in terms of white and red. We have to set that. Where is my commercial discipline? Where am I aiming at? And I'm talking about red and white because black have very limited room in the market and very limited time windows. Then I think our problem first is not volume, it's distribution, the weekly distribution. And we cannot understand our business without looking at the Peruvian weekly distribution, because the sum of the part is more than the American market. We repeat this over and over again, is capable of consuming. We have to be disciplined, and we cannot get in and out from a market at our discretion. Hopefully, Felipe Canacri expresses this very clearly. What is having a schedule? What is having that discipline? Sometimes we blame exporters, but sometimes we are arriving with fruit. And we were talking to John this morning with 55, 60, 70 days. What's going on with logistics? Something we're going to talk about later on. I don't know if the volume is the problem. It's the distribution we're having on a weekly basis without looking at what Peru is doing earlier. We have to look at the growth of South Africa. It was mentioned, and I would be very, very strict if Indians improve their post-harvesting. They have the varieties and they are having very good results, and they are going to be in the question that has no answer. What's Chile's volume? Our problem is not quality. Our problem is condition, and it is fruit very respectfully old. I think that's our issue, rather than setting that number. In that very sense, I think the answer is going to be shorter. But when the U.S. compensated in February, we started to stop our shippings and said, I do not want Chilean fruit, and they preferred Peruvian fruit, and we changed from 70% we were sending to the American market to almost half. Do you think, I'm going to ask the question to whom it may concern, is it sustainable that being Peru and Chile being stabilized that and producing more fruit because the problem is not volume? Are we capable of distributing across the world at sustainable prices, that making our fruit culture in Chile, particularly, to be sustainable in the long run? Because we don't have more continents unless we cover the Antarctic. What can we do there? I've worked most of my career as grape exporters, in some case a partner of companies from the Netherlands. And I think the only way to solve that issue, Drago, is, well, we all show off the long-term relationships, but it is really being confident, having confidence with the importer, if having discipline. If a supermarket doesn't get the fruit, it's going to go out and buy it, and they will punish their importers. And the importers, if they didn't receive the fruit, they're going to go out of the market to buy it. We have climate uncertainty, weather uncertainty. What we need discipline to take care of those markets that we're referring to. What we said a few years earlier, exchange rate, but we have to analyze the market. What's the return, the money you're looking? Do not expect having results in every market. Find the balance if what's your average result, but weighted by market. Gonzalo, your opinion? Well, I think market diversification, because it's very important. Obviously, try to find alternatives. Perhaps the US will be the main market for Chile for a long time, but I think we have to diversify. The critical point is, well, what's first, the egg or the chicken? If looking for markets, it must be an ongoing thing. There are always opportunities to go to Europe, Canada, and so forth. But what's first, the egg or the chicken, whether looking at the market or having the varieties to face those markets? I've seen that many times we've tried with open new markets, and at the end of the day, they have failed. For instance, Asian markets that are important beyond the crisis that could be open in China, they are very demanding markets. If you work very well a market with a variety, I don't know, as not to use one of ours, such as the Regal from South Africa, it was a disaster. I think we have to make a huge effort on diversifying, looking within Latin America and so forth, looking for markets. Just to put an example, we've got a comparative advantage to go to those other markets. The US, we already know the story, because we are in a time window, in particular in the central, because South Africa is very tired. India, there are still a few years for them to have the best varieties. The second crop in Piura and Jalisco, Mexico, is weak, or the first crop in Piura from April. Brazil also have their own problems. I think we have to insist on new markets, but the switch change we have to make with the product, different things about the product, not only the size, but what varieties, we talked about this, the condition, and commercial actions. sending to one market one thing, but having a partnership as we could have with AMFRESH is something different. We have to get close to the retailers as much as possible. I think that improving varieties and working more on condition, we got possibilities to expand our current markets. Right. This question is for brave people. Coco, let's go. Is there anything we could do to reverse the preference by Peruvian fruit by retailers? Well, as Gonzalo said, we have an extraordinary opportunity late in our season, and I insist again. I think if we transform into a reliable, disciplined supplier, that we respond and we respond to our agreements, that way importers will also respond to the agreements. And we've talked about this clearly with Martin Silva. It's technical and commercial discipline. Today it was said at the beginning of the presentation by what they want is discipline. They want availability, 52 weeks of a constant, without changes, without surprises fruit. If we achieve that, of course, we are going to be a preferent supplier, a preferent vendor. We have lost that window. It's not Peru, sorry, but it is not Peru, it's us. It is us. We stop being competitive. That I said this honestly, that a Chilean answer an email with all the information an importer requires, it is a big process. South Africa, 2 minutes after the container was shipped, they have all the information there. Peruvians in between. But non-American exporters receiving the information from my colleagues, from my Chilean friends, is almost impossible. Discipline. We had good room, we had good fruit, we had the business. So sorry, look at the attendance here. Look at where we are. There is material, but we are lacking discipline. And this is I'm going to say a very classy word. We are fucked off as a country. Please mark your opinion. The question is there anything we could do?
Okay.
We can do something to to get the same prices that we have Peru, or have an inversion, what the quality and what the market think about the Peruvian fruit instead of our fruit. We can go one step to be the same of Peru or over Peru.
So, firstly, it's so hello again. It's a very interesting situation for me to be in the panel of experts talking about grapes when everybody in the room understands more about growing grapes than you do. So, but I think, look, the situation with Peru and Chile, it strikes me as being many things. Firstly, I'm concerned that it becomes an unhealthy obsession for Chile to only look to Peru. And for sure, Peru has had a huge impact on the industry. And you can see by Rafa's pricing graphs that when there is too much production, the price is too low to be sustainable. Always the difficulty for retailers and markets is to be managing fruit not in the middle of the season, but on the shoulders of the season. So Peru makes good money at the beginning of the season, and it sustains them through the middle of the season.
Yes.
And then they disappear to some extent, and then Chile picks up the end of the season. It's really important that that pricing is understood not to be constant, but to be maximized during the shoulders of seasons. Also, I think it very much depends on the markets. So the North American market is going to be the most competitive market for Chile and Peru because of the proximity and the size and scale of the market. But it is not the only market. And so I would also encourage, and I think my fellow panelists have been discussing it, that competition also is with India perhaps in the future, with more and more varieties now being grown in India through Ara, through Bloom, through Sunworld looking in, and that also will be challenging. But I think the opportunity exists to continue to find points of difference, but it's not, as I was saying in my speech, it's not just about volume. You cannot just grow volume and expect to sell it in today's market. It needs to be more targeted.
Okay, thank you. And another question for you, Mark. This season, some importers have better results than the other ones, but a huge difference. What do you think? Why what those happen? Why? What's the reason that we have very average, nice results, and the other receivers with the same fruit, very, very bad results in United States market?
Yeah, I think that we talked earlier about partnership and about deep understanding, and it is critical for supermarkets around the world to have quality product on their shelves. And they also understand all the complexities of growing fresh produce that, again, Rafa was talking in so much detail about. And so resilience and partnership, I think, are a large reason why some importers are able to lean on a relationship to ensure that the average returns are more acceptable, even during difficult circumstances. And of course, that partnership needs to extend all the way back through the supply chain. So a deep understanding of what the cost base and the cost base to produce the fruit in the first place, to have the right relationships, and dare I say, data at their fingertips to ensure they're making the right decisions in the right markets, will obviously increase the average returns of importers. So again, it's about picking your partners.
Okay.
They have to be linked in the value chain and be able to deliver on their part.
Don Cristian Corssen.
Mr. Christian Corsos, I'm going to switch from Coco's French to Spanish. Why do you think some importers have much better results than others for the same fruit in the same season? I think there were three scenarios, and these scenarios were produced because, obviously, as Rafa said at the beginning, during November and December there was little fruit, very good prices. There was the phantom of the strike in the West Coast, and many importers started to collect fruit, and they maintained high prices fictitiously. When the strike wasn't materialized in January, what happened is that these big importers that import lots of fruit from Chile and Peru found a very, very high stock. At the same time, there were no promotions. Prices were very high. Then they started to move that fruit and they started to drop prices. This was not in the overnight, and that added because of logistics. We had lots of weeks after mid-January when more than 4 million boxes arrived to the American market. Then Group A, these big importers, were flooded for 8 to 10 weeks that they started to move this fruit. Luckily, they had lots of customers, retailers that were capable of moving the fruit, but since the preference was Peruvian fruit, they first moved the Peruvian fruit. The Chilean fruit was stuck in the system. There was a lot of waste, a lot of donations, lots of sales at low prices. The second group, importers that do not manage their volume, and at the same time they brought a lot of fruit because prices were high, but they have little commercialization channels or just a small number of retailers. They figured out that after this strike that didn't happen, nobody was buying the fruit, and the few customers they had stopped buying, and they have accumulating this fruit. They have to sell this little by little to the wholesaler market with very low prices, with very bad results, and lots of repacks and lots of donations. And at the end of the day, there was a group of exporters that did it well. They didn't speculate with this strike. They are very, very disciplined. They match very well their offer with the demand. They export what they can sell. They have very good customers and a wider variety, of course, and they were capable, although not at the prices that they estimated, but they could maintain the flow and the turnover of their stock. I think that those exporters have much better prices than the other two groups. Thank you. Gonzalo, what markets were the most receptive to this diversification? And what markets decreased or were no alternatives for this season? I would say in general there were not too many markets that were more recipients. Chile always has an escape valve, in my view, when there's a mess in the United States going late to Europe. It is a good alternative. That market has always worked, well, not always, but there are smaller volumes. Unfortunately, well, we all know that we have decreased in Asia. I wanted to make a point in Asia that Asia is not only China, there are many other countries. We have to insist that China and Asia always in these crisis periods absorb much less grape, but they price quality and condition. China, unfortunately for us, ask for fresh fruit. They care a lot about taste and color, but I think we cannot keep on hitting the United States with the Peru issue and variety change. Since we are in low period in Asia, we have to continue with that market. Of course, there are other challenges, Korea, Musk, all these other things we've talked about, but for the preferred fruit, and there are some brands from Peru and Chile that maintain good price levels despite of the problems we've experienced. They have shown that high quality will be awarded, will be priced. In summary, I didn't see lots of response from other markets, but the European and Canadian. Canada is a market that requires this fumigation, and it's a market that was very well developed, and out of that I don't see much more. Okay, thank you. Enrique. We love working with the productive equation. I think today the productive equation is close to 4,000 boxes with reasonable cost and with reasonable qualities. Do you think we have to seek anything else, or don't you agree with that productive equation? It's easy to say, but, well, the productive equation is just a number. I think we have to define what's the potential of each variety and what's the potential of the zone to produce 4,000 boxes. There's a problem there that yesterday was talked in the Cherry Tech regarding cherries, that there was a cherry crisis and low prices, and everybody thought about spend less and try to figure out how to spend less money. Table grape, I've always said this, that is one of the species that in order to produce good fruit we have to spend money, and that's an entry point. I don't know if are 4,000 boxes. It could be 3,500 because commercial issues abroad are important, the commercial management. But I would care about We always talk about production and also about the marketing and the commercial aspect. There's a very important aspect, which is operation. And what I mean by operations is from harvesting and on. In the case of table grape, that operation stage, I think, sets 70% of the success of failure of fruit in different markets. There, I think we have to care about much more, and we have to get more involved in making decisions regarding cropping times, number of cropping days. Sometimes we are packaging the same variety for 3 weeks. Today, the size, we shouldn't be scared about the size. Size of 21 millimeters is an entry point today. The thing is, we have to produce the 3,500, the 4,000 boxes with that entry point. And on top of that, I say Chile is the country furthest away from anywhere in the world. We have an operation that many times, and I think growers have to make an important change. There's a thing they don't know. We have to know from the crop. I always make a parallel between grapes and cherries. They do not follow their maturation process. The last time we see the fruit, the best we could produce is the moment we cut the fruit from the grape. From that moment on, it is rotten. What we do is the deterioration is as slow as possible, but it doesn't improve anymore. And there today we have packing issues. Not everybody has packings in Chile, at least, with standards for that, whether packages, the cropping stage with humidifiers, packing times. We continue with packings taking too many hours, and fruit doesn't wait. If we compare it again with cherries, the business of cherries changed when we achieved Cherries Express to arrive in 25 days. And cherries, since we crop it very early, from very early in the morning up to noon maximum, we put in chilled water as soon as possible. We cannot do that with grapes. The result is that we arrive with a very good product to China, and that has made the cherry what it is. Unless this year that we have achieved with 120 million boxes. If we translate this into grapes, the process in between, in the old days there wasn't too many logistics problems, but today we have. And the grape is going to be difficult this to change in the main market, or what one half of the fruits goes to. We require fumigation. That it's something we know. The damage produced by fumigation, not only by the direct damage of methyl bromide, but because of the temperature increase, it's done. With the logistics problems we have, it's too many days. A chamber ship, a freezing ship takes 12 days, and they have fumigation preference. A liner ship takes 22 days. Because of all these collapse we've talked about, we have volumes from many weeks. There might be 15 days with the fruit in the port without being able to withdraw that fruit. What Coco said earlier, I think on average, if fruit is not sold before 40 or 45 days. We have to know that, and we have to understand that. That way we could arrive with a better product. Sorry. There's a question we would like to ask everyone, and to be respectful with the organization of the schedule, with the agenda. We would love to, as brief as possible, for everybody to have the possibility to give the last message as a summary, or the message that is addressed to growers and to everybody who came to listen to what could we do to revert the situation of the table grape? In 2 words, Coco, what's your message? Could it be 3? Well, 2.5. First, let's become into an industry. Let's have technical and commercial discipline. We must believe in the business, and in this place, nobody is extra. But those who don't want to be here, the door is open.
Yeah, I think, is this, yeah, thank you. So I think the key message has to be collaboration in the entire value chain. I know I'm repeating myself, but it's so critical, and I totally agree around logistics, the real understanding of picking to market and what that looks like for the consumer is key. Thank you.
Thank you. Gonzalo?
Gonzalo. Regarding the productive equation? No, your final message. Okay, sorry. Well, you're saying 2 words, but my final message, just to sum up the most important. I think our challenge is by clustering the election of varieties, production control, planning of production control in time and substance, is the logistics, and engaging more with the market, what consumers want. My message is that any effort, despite we are exporters, by any effort by growers to be more integrated in this decision-making chain. I think today a grower came and the exporter said, plant this. You have to be more involved in the 4 parts of the process if you cannot export with a reliable exporter, and that's the key, being involved in the production part. The different varieties, there's full tide of varieties. It's talked about new varieties. This is a very dangerous term. Grape in production is very different to the other because there's labor force, personnel involvement. I will quote a statement by a grower. He puts in, they say the fertilizers are the footprints of the growers, and the presence of growers is key in the different stages. I'll have to travel more and not changes. I will end this myth to go to seek responsibilities because of the things we did badly. We have to learn, we have to have a reliable partner and focus on improvements. In the case of orchards here, we in the logistics and sales, we have the duty of working with receivers, with the port of Wilmington, with the port of whatever the logistics. We have to be, it's important not only having quality control in the packing, ensuring the full value chain, and this is a very strong work, in particular by growers, because you work with lots of labor force and there are many subtles between different nuances between different varieties and sons. I would say 3 points. First, competition. We have to produce today the qualities, varieties, and condition consumers want, not what we can produce. We have to adapt to the market. Second, I think productive equation. Rafael said at the beginning we have to add the quality and condition factor. All the incentives I see are in terms of boxes. How many boxes do we export? How many boxes do we produce? No, the incentive must be how many good quality boxes are we producing and exporting in Chile. And finally, I think the great advantage of Peru is that most of them are vertically integrated. And I think here there's a lot of disaggregation between the operational stage, as Enrique said, advisory and commercial stage. And I think we have to be aligned. If we are not on the same page and all of us align and talk in the same language, it is difficult to arrive well with good results and a good market. That's it. Thank you. Enrique? Well, as a complement to everything that was said, I think here it plays a very important role, the growers. Growers definitely has to make responsible, they have to be accountable of what they put in the box. I think That's something very powerful. From the fruit growing perspective, I grew up. I was always said there are a few of us who choose being exporters and others choose being growers. And I think that's the big mistake that the Chilean industry did, that was translated in what Coco said. We don't have an industry. We don't work as an industry. And I think growers, as in the old days, they provided the fruit to the quality control of the company and they assumed their responsibility was over. Today, that must change definitely. What they produce, what they pack. Let's remember, the grape is craft made. Every person defines what they put in box. It's not like in a machine they have a defect selector. Then the great advantage of grapes is that it could be differentiated, and to a same variety there are growers doing this very well and others do it very badly. As long as we align all that and we all produce better fruit, the industry issue is also important. The Frutas de Chile Committee, it used to be called SOEX, must work not only with exporter mindset but also with grower mindset. At the same time, growers, represented in this case by Fedefruto, Victor is here in this room, they also must be involved. They have to know, they have to travel, they have to know what customers want, because at the end of the day, they are the one, they put the fruit there. And when you go abroad and you see that your fruit is repacked, and today it must be between $12 repacking between waste and cost, there's no sustainability for that business. I leave that message. Let's be an industry and let's work aligned, growers and exporters, for this boat to float. Thank you, Enrique. We have 1,000 questions outstanding, but that's it. Thank you very much. A great round of applause. Really, thank you very much for your disposition. No. Well, thank you, please. And now we're going to have a coffee break. Yes? Thank you very much, Enrique Turri, Christian Corssen, Gonzalo Tocornal, Oscar Salgado, and the moderators who did an excellent work, Carolina Cruz, Dragomir, Ljubetic. We wrap up this first segment of the morning, and now we invite the attendees to enjoy a nice coffee break, courtesy of AMFRESH. We've got a video that is running right now.